Hey Chivermanos, how are you? This is a very special week because we have the visit of Athletic Club Bilbao, who is visiting Guadalajara, and we're playing a friendly against them on Sunday for the Arbol de Gernika trophy. Remember that we already disputed the first leg last December at San Mamés. With regards of the visit of Los Vizcaínos to La Perla Tapatía, we are opening up the history books and the memory lane to remember some of the best stories and anecdotes of El Guadalajara against European teams. We have tours, we have visits from other teams to La Perla Tapatía, even matches in Capital Rojiblanca, and of course matches in the United States. So stay here, because in this edition of We Go to Tops, we are remembering some of the best stories and anecdotes of Chivas against European teams. Since we are going in chronological order, the very first match of El Rebaño against European opponents dates back to August 7th, 1947, when Chivas faced the Hungarian team Ferencváros at Parque Oblatos. Remember that those were the glorious days of Hungarian football, when the Eastern European country produced world-class players such as Ladislao Kubala, Ferenc Puskás, Zoltán Csibor, or Sándor Kocsis, and it was just 7 years later when Hungary arrived to the World Cup final of 1954 that they lost against Germany in what became known as the Miracle of Bern. But going back to 1947, Chivas defeated Ferencváros in that first match against European teams, and then Chivas disputed 16 matches against European rivals from 9 different countries between 1948 and 1963. These opponents included Stuttgart, Hanover, FC Barcelona, Sporting Gijón, Palermo, and the Moscow Soviet Union national team. We now travel to the era of El Campeonísimo. In 1964, Chivas became the first Mexican team to play in Europe since El Rebaño made a 10-match tour across the old continent. Its opponents were FC Barcelona, Sporting Gijón, Sevilla, Mestalla, Lille Olympique, Angers, Rouen FC, Standard Liège, Werder Bremen, and Slovan Bratislava. The tour ended with 2 wins, 4 draws, and 4 losses. Once back in Mexican soil, Chivas played again against Barça at Ciudad Universitaria in Mexico City on July 31st, 1964, in what was a 3-2 victory for the Blaugranas. Chivas was already a referent for Mexican football in the early days, and the international exposure for El Guadalajara kept itself during the following years. Between 1965 and 1971, Chivas disputed 15 international friendlies, and some of the opponents included AC Milan, Sparta Prague, Atlético de Madrid, Sporting Lisbon, and Bayern Munich. In the following years, the Red and White played less matches against Europeans, only 6 precisely between the mid-70s and mid-80s. However, we can brag by saying that we won 6 out of 6, and those matches were against Wolfsburg, Nancy, Dinamo Zagreb, Udinese, and Belenense. 1987, the year of La Novena, was a busy one against international opponents. Some of the rivals included the Spanish national team, Stuttgart, Sporting Lisbon, Dundee United, and Roma. And this is how we get to the Italian era. Remember that during the 1990s, Italian teams were the dominant force in Europe, and that's how 8 out of the 10 Champions League finals of the decade had the presence of an Italian team. Between 1994 and 1997, Chivas played against Italian teams. 2 of the most remembered matches took place during Copa Tecate in 1994, when both AC Milan and Inter visited Guadalajara to play against El Rebaño. AC Milan were the recently crowned European champions. Chivas then spent 7 years without playing against a European opponent, and it was not until the summer of 2005 when El Chiverío disputed a friendly against Real Madrid at the Soldier Field of Chicago. It was the Real Madrid of Los Galácticos with David Beckham, Ronaldo, Iker Casillas, Raúl, Zinedine Zidane, Roberto Carlos, and more figures under the management of Brazilian coach Vanderlei Luxemburgo. Chivas' goal was scored by Paco Palencia. It is worth noting that we were ahead with 15 minutes left to play. However, we ended up losing by 3-1. The following year, Chivas played against Frank Rijkaard's Barcelona, who had just won the 2006 Champions League a few months before. The friendly took place at the LA Memorial Coliseum, and the final score was 1-1. The goals were scored by Eidur Gudjohnsen and Diego Martinez. One of the best matches of El Rebaño against La Liga teams took place the following year. In 2007, Chivas defeated Racing de Santander by 5-0 at Copa de La Paz, disputed in South Korea. Remember, that was a great Racing de Santander who used to spend those years in the Spanish First Division. One of the most remembered friendlies in the recent memory took place in the summer of 2010 as the inaugural match of Estadio Akron. It was the first ever match disputed at La Casa de las Chivas, and it was against Sir Alex Ferguson's Manchester United. Remember that it was the Javier Hernandez farewell to the Chiva Nation before playing for Man United, and El Chicharito disputed one half with each team. The final score was 3-2 for Chivas. It is still fresh in our memories the day that Chivas defeated Pep Guardiola's Barcelona by 4-1. The match took place on August of 2011 in Miami. That Barca is considered by many as the greatest team of all time and presented itself as Spanish and European champions. However, Chivas had a great night, and with 2 goals by Marco Fabián and goals scored by Giovanni Casillas and José Luis Verduzco, defeated the Blaugranas by a memorable 4-1. We keep ourselves facing Pep Guardiola, but this time it was during his years at Bayern Munich. During the summer of 2014, Chivas and Los Bávaros faced each other in New Jersey. It is worth noting that Bayern were the current German champions after Guardiola's first year in Bavaria, and the year before, in 2013, they had won the treble under Jupp Heynckes. Going back to the friendly, Bayern defeated Chivas by 1-0 thanks to a header scored by Claudio Pizarro at the 10th minute after a corner kick taken by Frank Riveri. Since Chivas is facing Athletic Club Bilbao at Estadio Akron, we remember the time that FC Porto visited Estadio Akron in the summer of 2017. The final score was a 2-2 tie. El Rebaño's starting 11 was composed by Miguel El Guacho Jiménez, Leopoldo Cortés, Galindo Zamora, Benítez, López, Godínez, Magaña, Gutiérrez, Torres, and Macías. The Supercopa Tecate remained without a winner because after the tie, the Portuguese team denied a penalty shootout. These have been some of the memorable anecdotes and stories of El Guadalajara against European teams, kicking it off at mid-20th century, when we were the first team to have international exposure in Mexico, and then in the 1960s we became the first Mexican team to make a European tour. El Guadalajara always innovating. And then we presented some of the most memorable matches in recent history. I hope you've enjoyed this edition of We Go Shoot-Ups. Remember that on Sunday we face Athletic Club Bilbao at Estadio Akron, and the match is kicking off at noon Central Mexican time. For more information, stay tuned to our English Twitter account at Chivas_. I am Alfredo Rodriguez, and as always, arriba las Chivas.